Under the umbrella of the Ministry of Local Government, the East Port of Spain Development Company Limited has been mandated to develop the area. They have hosted a series of special public design workshops called Community Design Charettes. The design and planning workshops facilitated residents and other stakeholders who were invited to participate in redesigning their respective communities.
Our mandate for the company is for the economic, social, and physical regeneration of East Port of Spain, which means the redevelopment of East Port of Spain socially, in terms of its economic development and its physical development, meaning that we're looking at planning, we're looking at urban planning in particular, we're looking at the spaces that we have in East Port of Spain, we're looking at the land and the land use, and exactly how we could redevelop the area to make life better for the residents and stakeholders of East Port of Spain.
The Oxford Dictionary defines a charrette as a public meeting or workshop devoted to a concerted effort to solve a problem or plan a design. The design charrettes were led by a team of very experienced urban designers who facilitated the workshops to enable participants to share in an effort to create an improved East Port of Spain.
And the consultants are from the US, they're US based, but they work all over the world in terms of bringing back communities and urban design to retrofit, what we call retrofit communities, to serve the needs of a very modern and evolving society.
My name is Victor Dover, and I work with Elma to lead the design and planning team that is working to assist you in producing a plan. But this isn't going to be Elma's plan or Victor's plan. If we can get people to come participate and touch the map and show us what's important, it will be your plan. So that's the purpose of this. In order to do that, we're doing today a thing we call Designing in the Sunshine. Instead of trying to produce the plan in our offices or inside the bureaucracies or the government ministries and then coming out and showing it to you all finished, we'd rather design the plan together in the sunshine, in the public. It's a little bit like going into a restaurant or a cafe where you can see the cook cooking. Okay, so that means we don't have the answers yet. We're just asking the questions today. So we use the maps as a way of doing visual listening. We need to use the maps to prompt you to tell us what's important. You might point out what needs to be changed, as Elma described, but you might also point out what needs to be conserved and where change needs to be managed or minimized. So we're not just looking for the bad stuff. We're also looking for the best of what exists.
As part of the preparation for the workshops, they visited the communities and put a plan in motion.
We started off our team with a site tour. We went into the communities and to just get a detailed on-the-ground look as to what was happening in some of these areas.
Keeping past studies in mind, the East Port of Spain Development Company was able to reach out to the community members to draft a plan based on their experiences while living in the various areas.
We've been consulting previous plans and studies. We know that the area has been widely studied before, and we've been consulting these documents as we go through the plan. We've identified a few analysis diagrams: streets and trails, greens and waterways, public facilities and utilities, and all of these just inform our design a little bit greater. We hosted an open house at our design space where we stopped for the evening and we pinned up all of the work in progress, or the draft designs that we had come up with, and asked members of the community to come in, look over our shoulders, and ask us questions. Why are you doing certain things? And I heard this idea on Saturday that I don't see in the plan. Why? And we'd be able to better explain that to you.
Residents of East Port of Spain came out eagerly and shared on issues related to their local areas. Participants took part in surveys and exercises.
So what we've heard so far, we've heard lots of things. We've heard all of your concerns, your ideas, and your needs and wants for your community. We've heard that you need new cultural facilities, that crime is an issue, that there are underutilized and valuable land and buildings that should be utilized properly, that you need better school facilities, and that there are drainage problems, and there needs to be proper waste disposal, and there needs to be economic development. We asked you, what's your vision in one word? We had a very entertaining interlude by Roy and Gloria, which was great. It kind of broke some ice and let the residents know that it was okay, you know, to share their ideas and that they should take responsibility and ownership of their neighborhood. And we asked at the end of the day, each table had a representative to report back to the larger group what their findings were at every table. At the end of that session, we asked you to fill out some hands-on design surveys.
The community charrettes were well received and met with great success. Some of the areas that were looked at were sewer systems, walkways, drainage health facilities, and community centers. Students of schools within the vicinity were also included in the workshops.
We had a few youth hands-on workshops. I think we had about 3 within the community, and this one from Southeast Port of Spain Secondary School, which was very exciting. They were highly energetic. We had about 40, maybe 30 to 40 students. They presented in the same style that we did at the hands-on design session with the adults. And they had some really great ideas, and it was to get the youth perspective as to what would get them involved in the community, what would get them active and behind, you know, an Xbox or a TV, and what would get them more engaged. We talked about their schools and how we thought that they could better connect to the communities also.
Armed with all the support and information gathered, the team had an open studio session where they were able to take the suggestions and findings to the next level.
There were a few key moments. One was Friday night in the room upstairs when there were 4 things that I heard that just really stamped themselves on my brain, and I kept bringing them up over the week as we would look at drafts, and I would ask questions about what all the various technicians and specialists were doing within their area of expertise. One of the first ones we heard, one of the first people who spoke last Friday night, said his recommendation was that this plan and the efforts of the East Port of Spain Development Company and all of the associated and allied partners in the effort should be not just about building up buildings or parks or roads or pipes or wires, but about building up people. And as the week went on, we began to really understand in a new way, we thought we understood before, but in a new way what that meant. The second one we heard was when a gentleman from the right side of the room stood up and said, "We've heard about a lot of plans before," and went through briefly the history of previous plans and studies and in some cases broken promises or stalled efforts, and said, can this one be one we really do? And can you think from the very beginning about how we do it, not just what to do? And we promised we would. We gathered up all of those big ideas and dreams and hopes and so on and began to sort them according to the most doable and the most immediate and those which were much more long-term. You know, any community worthy of the name shouldn't set out to deliberately plan to become less than what it considers ideal, right? So we asked you to take that big dream with us, that journey, and then we also have to step back and say, what are the means available now? What has to happen first? Imagine building a pyramid. You have to build a wide foundation at the bottom first before you build the high, sky-reaching, pointy top. And that's what's the base of this pyramid that needs to be built. The third thing
we heard that made an impression. Struck us a couple of different ways. One was we were admonished by the gentleman who made this comment that a plan that was the right plan would communicate to everyone reading it that they were personally responsible for building a piece of it. It's not just the plan or the ideas in this document are not going to be given to you. I think someone said, we're not going to get this from Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny. But I am responsible, and you are responsible. We're individually responsible. And the other meaning we took from this admonition was just the general importance of personal responsibility within East Port of Spain. That the community has to make it happen themselves. They can't expect to just count on outsiders or the national government to realize the needs and act on them in the way they need to be acted on, with the speed they need to be acted on. Someone said, you realize we've had plans before, and every time there's an election, the old plans get thrown away and the new plans get started up again. How do we make the plan last despite buffeting of the winds of politics, the swinging of the political pendulum back and forth? How do we make the plan endure despite that? And I took a crack at it that night, and I said, we need a plan that's compelling enough that people on both sides, whatever the factions may be, will fight over who can take the most credit for getting the most of it done. And they can argue with each other about who loves the plan the most, as opposed to saying, that was their plan, now it's our plan. And so the goal this week was to come up with something that had that kind of compelling feeling to it, while at the same time being realistic. And some of the recommendations that we have are going to seem impossibly small, given the size of that giant piece of geography and the need for a 50 or 60 or 100-year plan, and the big problems besetting the area. Some of the recommendations may sound really modest, and that is very deliberate. Think of the base of the pyramid we have to build. The biggest issue we have on this draft plan is raising confidence in East Port of Spain. I will only paraphrase because I don't want to quote anyone directly, but as we talked to people from East Port of Spain this week and in previous interviews, we couldn't help but notice a kind of general feeling, a mindset that things were never going to change, and that the difficulties, the strife and the street violence and the poverty and the sanitation problems and various forms of tragedy that have beset East Port of Spain now for many years would never change. There was a moment this week when Rick and Dwayne and myself were standing on the Brian Lara Promenade, examining the traffic flows and so on. You'll know more about that later. In the gutter, just a few feet from where we were standing, there was a bag of trash. There were two little bags of trash. One of them had been torn open by a dog that went into it, probably looking for groceries. But there was a trash receptacle 20 feet away. But the person who dropped their trash there just felt like the gutter was a good enough place for it. And this was a person who was thinking there's no other life, it doesn't matter, nobody cares about us, why should I care? They had that kind of philosophy about things. And as we stood there, a car drove by on the south side of the promenade. And the driver slowed down. I know it was none of you. It's an old late model green vehicle. He dropped the driver's side window and he slowed way down and he reached over and he put his hand out the window and he dropped an empty juice bottle he'd just finished right on top of that pile of garbage in the gutter. What one person had started, another person thought was an inevitable cycle or spiral, and there was no point trying to do better. So we realized as we were standing there that all the stories you had told us about daily life and struggle and difficulty and things that had happened were capsulized in that example. Because there was a sense of surrender and a loss of community order and really no faith in the future that was communicated by that. I know this is hard to hear, but I'm the consultant from out of town, Dr. Thomas, so I can give you the tough love speech. And so we said, let's talk about this with Dr. Thomas and the others. If you have to start somewhere, and you want projects that can be started in a big way in the next 6 months or 18 months to show tremendous difference and have success and restore confidence because something is actually working, why not start there?
The traditional settlements of East Port of Spain were used as a basis to enhance existing structures which can be used to generate employment, promote walking, cycling, health, and improve transit.
This is fantastic to declare victory. Charlotte Street, look at the vendors, the happy pedestrians, the concentration of people. And I say that partly knowing that a great deal of improvement has happened with the revamp of the vendor program over the last few months. Things have been tried and are beginning to work out. You know, when we noticed that Charlotte Street is working well, but could be more, and took in a lot of the comments you made about it and started making simulations, the what if pictures. We asked ourselves in Charlotte Street, what if you begin to alter the way that street looks, very subtly, very slowly, you start getting the overhead wires out. Maybe you pedestrianize it at certain times of the day or certain days of the week. Here on the lower right-hand corner of that drawing, you can see the little bollards that can rise up out of the pavement. You can set those up on a hydraulic thing and have a key button just like someone would have for an automatic garage door. And the police or the fireman or the ambulance would always have access, or someone that needed to make a delivery could have access. But the rest of the time, in that 4 hours or 12 hours a week, it could be close to traffic. If you did that, you'd have the ability to let the pedestrians have vendors on both sides of the street and actually make it even more of a happening than it is now to allow it to grow. Now remember our friend the garbage pail over here. The suggestion in this image, before and after, is that if you use lighting cleverly, as I know has been experimented with, it could be part of the decorative appearance of the place. Why not? You know, if you can inspire the owners of these properties to think that their address is more than just something to live with, but something to make more of, you'll begin to see improvements in the architecture. Maybe cleaning the street and maybe even extending the hours of operation. The area around sea lots is one of the great opportunities. Here we were looking at the Central Market before, and south of the highway at sea lots, east and west, with its combination of informal settlement and industrial buildings. In time, this place will need to be upgraded in a dramatic way. Short term, obviously, water, septic, sewer, basic needs need to be improved in this area. And the tangle of the shantytown needs to be untangled a little to make it possible for people to circulate and be safe. So small and subtle things can be done there at first. Over time, I think you're going to come to see this whole area as a unique acreage in the nation, however, because of its waterfront location, its access, its ability for the buildings that will someday occupy it in a more permanent way to have views of the skyline and the mountains in the distance. It's inevitable that it will become necessary to build anew in that area. And if you're smart about how you do it, no one gets displaced. You can actually make it possible for a mixed income community to grow that incorporates the people who are there now if they wish to stay, instead of a solely low-income community that's there now. In the process, you deconcentrate the poverty, but you would improve the quality of life. And you know, when the shantytown or informal settlement shacks are not needed anymore because housing of a 21st century sort has been created just adjacent, then that area can be redeveloped as well. So now we've moved past the 6 months or 6-year time frame, and we're into the long term, like not necessarily in our generation. The definition of sustainable development is that you meet the needs of the present generation without sacrificing the needs of future generations to meet their needs. Future generations will want to see this area redeveloped and improved, so you set up the initial actions so that that is not foreclosed, not unduly accelerated, but left possible. Here's a view looking, in fact you can see the lighthouse here, looking back towards sea lots, and it reinforces why I think this is a unique location. We were just looking at the cove here, and imagine that happier time in the future when we've gotten smarter about behavior, including the garbage, upland in the neighborhoods. And so the river is no longer just a trash chute, dumping chemicals and plastics into the harbor, but actually could be a feature in the community, scenic and environmentally sound. And when that happens, the water quality will be, you can improve here, and some dredging can take place, fish market can return. So Eduardo began a series of what-if sketches. And one of the most important things about this sketch is an idea that I think it is worth getting started on sooner rather than later. And that is the acquisition and reservation of public open space along the waterfront.
The team of consultants suggested principles along with a to-do list, a plan of action and strategy to maintain changes.
Sport is also a source of careers, okay? The last presenter spoke to the possibility of a central sporting facility. Who's going to manage that facility? There's something in sport studies, a discipline called sport management. Who's going to manage that facility? Do you want the persons to come from outside to manage the facility? Or do you want to manage that facility yourself? Okay? And there are a host of playgrounds and sporting areas in the community that suffer from no maintenance or no management whatsoever, much like some of our national stadia. And in this transformation process, you will need people with the requisite skills and capabilities to manage the process of change. Okay? You're seeing new infrastructure, beautiful designs. I support them totally. But when those things are constructed, they have to be sustained. Whether it is the highway, whether it is the roadway, and whether it is sporting facility, you have to sustain it and maintain it, and that requires management. So when we talk about sport for development, we're talking about using sport to deal with a range of social challenges and problems, whether it is crime, whether it is health, whether it is education. But here the point I am making is, in sport itself has to be managed, okay? And the recreation parks and sporting facility have to be managed. And you need to see it as something that's bigger than taking a sweat on the court every day, okay? And playing small ball, okay? And watching Messi and Man United play, okay? Or watching Chicago Bulls. You have to see how sport benefits you in terms of a career, so that, and particularly as it relates to transforming and developing your community. These are just some of the ideas that I have presently playing with. They're not the only ideas. In focusing on the public-private partnership, I have so far focused particularly on the community aspect of that process.
I was looking at the economic context here, working with Dr. McCree. It was a fascinating experience. We spent a lot of happy hours trying to crunch numbers here. But one of the things I noticed is that there have been hard times here, but also worldwide. And actually, on a national context, if you look at this is the change in employment between 2009 and 2010. By occupation, what you'll see is that you actually gained employment, which is a good thing. And your inflation rate at the time was about 5.8%, which is, I'm from Portland, Oregon, where we're at about 9.8% unemployment. So we're not doing as well as you. However, that said, if you look at the little red 900 on the right, what that is an increase in the number of unemployed at the same time that you had an increase in the number of people employed, which seems paradoxical. And the reason is that means that your labor force is growing a little bit faster than your employment. Well, when we look at all of this in context for the east port of Spain, basically nationally your economy has suffered, but it's still growing. And Trinidad and Tobago, as a nation, is rated to have a very good investment climate.
I think we have an ongoing exercise to do in terms of engaging local stakeholders, our own line ministry, the Ministry of Local Government, the Ministry of Planning. All these are people that we will engage with further as we get the draft plans and before we make any final designs to be presented.
The East Port of Spain Development Company continues to be the vision keeper of the community Charettes.